Okay, I'm going to share my screen, go right into our zip forms to basically be able to review disclosures today. So do you see the zip forms file
Yes.
there, Richard?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we're in zip forms. We're under the documents tab in a transaction I have here on 1430 Baker Street, just using this as an example today. So the documents tab, when you create a new listing in zip forms, in our specific zip forms, we have a template set up where it loads all of these documents into the file already. So most of the disclosures are going to be already inside the file. You're not having to go hunt them down and search for them. The majority of the ones you're going to use on each transaction are there. Occasionally, this is a different topic, but you'll have to go and get ones that if you need an addendum or cancellation or anything like that, you'll have to go get those forms. But we try to add all the normal disclosures to the transaction already. So with that said, in the transaction, one of those forms, let me find it. Let me move this over here. Where are you? Maybe it's, oh, no, it's not it. Disclosures. This might be, let me just create a new one because this might be a bad example. Sorry. So we'll go new listing, 123 Main Street. This is a residential. Right now it's going to be active agent. So residential listing template. We'll hit save. It's going to create a new transaction for us. Sorry, the other one didn't have what I was looking for. So
and David, also, if you just form a new one for a buyer's contract, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So this is our new transaction on 123 Main Street. Now we're going to go into the documents tab. As you can see, all these documents were already loaded into the transaction. If you need more forms, you're going to search for them here under all forms. So the one thing I was trying to find is in the transaction is our checklist. So it's closing and escrow checklist. This was updated as of last year, 4/17. We'll probably need to look at that again to see what we can add. But I wanted to show you this here because this is a guide to what documents are needed on a transaction. So let me show you this, open that up. All right, so here is a checklist for you. You're welcome to print this out, have it in front of you if you need to.
David, we're not seeing that.
Oh, you're not. Okay, let's see what happened here. Stop share. Sorry, guys. Here we go. See it now?
Yes.
Okay, so let me show you. You might have lost it. So closing and escrow checklist is right here in the transaction. We're going to open that up. And there's basically 3 sections to this. You have this top section is purchase docs, meaning when you're making an offer, everything that's usually included with making an offer. You have the listing section when you're getting the initial listing with the sellers, what's needed to be signed. So everything with the asterisk here are required in your transaction required by the DRE, the state of California. Okay, and then the third section are disclosures. So here's a list of all the required disclosures needed during a transaction. So this is a great reference for you. And then down below the other sections, if you have any addendums, counteroffers, requests for repairs, all that good stuff. So what I used to do is print this out, and when I have it signed by the buyer and the seller and the agent, I'll put the date. Like, okay, that's received, put a check mark. We're good there, we're good there. So it's a way to basically keep track of what you have and what you don't have. So this checklist, just wanted to show it to you guys, is right here in the transaction. So feel free to reference that as needed. So today's class is about disclosures. So Richard, let's just go on off the list here. The first one here, real estate transfer disclosure statement. I'm going to open it up if you want to start talking about it.
All right, well, transfer disclosure statement is basically where the seller is telling the prospective buyer what is in their property by checking off the boxes right here. As let's say they have sprinklers, you would check that off. Now, as they get to the bottom, then it starts asking, you know, exhaust fans in where? Well, kitchens and bathrooms typically, for an example. Then you're going to say what might be wrong with something that you checked off. You know, let's just say you have a garage door opener, but you don't have any remotes for it, you know, or if you do have a couple, you put how many you have. So that's where you would say what's wrong with what you checked off right here. That's basically it on that part. David, anything else on that?
Yeah, it's basically a checklist of the amenities or the things the house has. A lot of times I'll sit down and do this with the client face to face or over the phone, help them figure, you know, a lot of times they'll have questions. There's a box here that says, ask, is the seller is occupying or not occupying the property? Do they live in it, or is it a rental, or is it a second home, whatever it may be? Maybe they already moved out. You want to check the appropriate box there.
Yeah, one big thing to add here is even if you're filling it out, make sure the seller, and you should have them fill it out. But if you are filling it out, then make sure the seller tells you what they have and what they don't have. Don't assume something, because let's say you checked off that it had this and then it didn't. And then guess what? When the buyer complains, well, where's that at? Well, guess who might have to pay for one if they filled it out other than the seller? You know, so be careful about that, or the seller tuck it with them on the way out. So make sure seller fills this out. Very important. This is one of the more important disclosures out of the whole list, because this is where if a buyer comes in and finds things wrong, they're going back to this sheet first to see if it was disclosed or not. If it wasn't disclosed and there's things wrong, that sets up the buyer for a pretty good lawsuit. If it was disclosed, then obviously it, you know, is a testimonial for the seller that they did disclose that was wrong.
Exactly.
So any questions on any of that, anyone?
If you have any questions, you could also, I got the chat up too, so I can kind of monitor that as we go. All right, page 2 of the TDS. There's a question B. Are you, the seller, aware of any significant defects or malfunctions in any of the following? And then it goes through walls, ceiling, floors, fences, electrical system, plumbing. And a lot of times the sellers will go, well, I might have this issue, you know, with something. And I go, well, is it, I repeat the question, is it a significant defect or malfunction that you are aware of? So, well, I'm not really sure. Well, the answer is then no. You know, if you're not 100% sure, if it's in the word significant to me is like, it's a big problem. So most of the time it's no. Occasionally you might have, you know, a fence that's leaning over, looking ready to fall down or something. Moving down, again, are you, the seller, aware of any of the following? They have to be knowledgeable and 100% sure that these things are either true or not true. And most of the time in Stockton, a lot of these are no. You know, there's generally a lot of them are no. Sorry, my phone. Richard, if
yeah, you want no on you want no on all of them if it's possible, but one that comes up pretty often that is a yes, and I think it's what is it, number 2 or number 3?
Number 2 and number 12.
Yeah, the fence is shared in common.
Yeah.
If you live in any kind of neighborhood, most fences are. And then number 12, what is that one, Yolanda?
CC&Rs, deed restrictions or obligations.
There you go. Okay. So yeah, and again, that's your seller answering these, but you might just remind them these are common ones that are yeses, so that maybe they notice that when they're just flying down through there checking them off.
Yeah, I mean, 13 is very common, a yes as well. Is the house or property in a homeowners association? If so, is there any common facilities? So oftentimes those two are yeses as well if it's in a condo or in a HOA. And then if there's yeses to any of these, the seller needs to describe on this line, if the answer to any of these is yes, explain. So it doesn't have to be an elaborate paragraph. You can just say, hey, we share fences with the neighbors, or the home is in an HOA. Yeah. You don't have to go into too much detail, but you should add an explanation there.
Yep.
And then on page 3 of the TDS, please note that there's 2 places where the seller does need to sign, one up here and then also down here as well. So there's 2 places, don't miss it. I've had people miss, and I'm going back to hunt down signatures again. The agents also have to sign in a couple places as well. Anything else on this one, Mr. Hunley?
Well, I would say right there, go back up where you as the agent now are going to check off that first box saying that you have the attached, basically the AVID, AVID, which is, we'll go over that in just a minute.
Yeah.
That's attached there. Some people just fill out a couple lines right down there below. I would rather you not do that. I'd rather you do the AVID. That's kind of a requirement now in the state. And let's do as the state wants us to do to keep us safe. So make sure to check that part off, and then that's going to come maybe even next, the AVID.
Okay. All right. Any last minute questions on TDS? There's a lot to cover, so we're going to go through these kind of rapidly if possible.
Real quick, David, I wanted to point out that on the TDS, we do have flip properties that our clients, our investors are flipping the property and really never lived there.
Yeah.
Or sometimes can happen when the property having a rental investment property.
Mm-hmm.
What I do personally is I have them write down across the way. There's no way or area to put that in, but I do make them say seller has never lived in the property. So I'm only aware of what has been disclosed by either the tenant occupying the property or by, any repairs that have been done. But mainly, specifically, just kind of saying that the seller has never lived in the property. So if something comes up, let's say a tenant was there and they left and then it wasn't disclosed, then, it's up to the buyer actually to make sure that they do the due diligence.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good line
Yep.
to add.
Good point.
All right, moving on to the AVID, also known as the Agent Visual Inspection Disclosure. As an agent, you're required to walk through the property and disclose what you see visually, just visually. It says right here, California law does not require the agent to inspect the following: areas that are not reasonably or normally accessible, areas offsite the property, public records or permits, common areas of planned developments, condos, and so forth. So is an attic reasonably or normally accessible? Me? No. Is a crawl space reasonably or normally accessible? No. So you're not required to go sticking your head around attics or crawl spaces. Oftentimes, if a garage is full of the the seller's stuff, and I can't get around to inspect the garage, I'm going to note that on the TDS on the AVID, that the garage is full. I couldn't do a full inspection of the garage at the time of the inspection. On this document, On page 2, you have to put the date of the inspection. So if I went to a house today, it was at Thursday the 30th. If there's somebody else present, maybe a home inspector or the buyers, whoever was there, note that they were there. So on this moment in time, the garage was completely full of stuff, and I couldn't see any issues in the garage because I just couldn't see the walls. So that's why this is important to have a timestamp here of when you did this inspection. Here's some agent, it goes through and lists agent inspection limitations, roof, attic, everything I just kind of mentioned. Agent will not measure square footage. Agent's not going to do environmental stuff off property. So all those things I just kind of highlighted is listed here. Basically, it wants you to do basically a room by room visual inspection. Like, what do you see in this room? We mentioned this yesterday's meeting. You don't want to put nothing, you know, you want to put, you know, carpet, ceiling fan, you know, describe some things in the room. If I've said in some things that, you know, floors look uneven, you know, and I'll type out, I recommend you get a home inspection, just to cover my butt. Hey, this floor looks sloping. I recommend you get a home inspection. So, you know, anything visually broken, there's discoloration on the walls, there's staining on the carpets, there's staining on the floors, that kind of thing you want to include. You do not want to put in adjectives like large cracks or dark colored or blue carpet. I would leave out adjectives and just describe what you see. So basically it's a room by room account of what you see. Richard, do you want to add anything on the AVID since I'm
Yeah. Basically, you know, a lot of the common ones are, you know, cracks on the walls, nail holes in the wall, you know, that they're moving out now, they're taking down their pictures. You know, there's nail holes in the wall. Kitchens and bathrooms, lots of times, especially those white porcelain sinks, they're scratched up. You know, that's kind of common.
Yeah.
So a lot of common ones, when you can find those, that's good. That's something to fill in. But let's say you go in that room and like David said, there's nothing wrong. It's a flip. It's got brand new carpet, brand new paint, you know, brand new almost everything, even blinds. Well, then do like David said to do, put, you know, that there's carpet, blinds, you know, things like that in there to show what you're doing. Imagine this, that you are now in court and the judge is reading this and he needs to either believe you were in that house or not believe you were in the house, according to what you wrote. And that way, if you wrote something that describes that room, then that kind of proves that you were there.
Yeah.
And you've heard me mention that at least 10 times throughout the last year, because it's a pet peeve that I see done wrong a lot.
All right. Usually on a couple more things and we'll move on. On the exterior, so here's my example of the garage. I would write in, garage is full of seller's personal items, unable to inspect. Usually around the exterior of the building, there's cracks in cement, as Richard mentioned. I'm not going to write large cracks. I'm not going to write small cracks because that's all depending on, it's all relative to who's looking at them. I'll just put cracks in cement around the exterior walkways and driveway of the property. That'll cover you there. And most homes have cracking cement. So that way the buyer goes back and goes, well, look at all this cement. This is going to cost me thousands of dollars to replace. Well, I put it in the AVID that you should check it out. Just covers your butt. One thing to note, we'll move on, is if this property is a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, you need an AVID for each unit. So if it's a duplex, you need 2. It's to fourplex, you need 4, makes sense. So each unit gets its own AVID. And yes, that adds to the workload and adds to the paperwork, but it's required.
Yeah, and David, same thing back to the TDS.
Okay. Is it?
It should be because, I mean, unless you put, if you can put both addresses in there and say it's a duplex, and then you can say unit number 2 has this missing and unit number 2 has that wrong. And you could, but it could get pretty complicated. So if it gets real complicated, do separate. If you can keep it pretty simple, just designate, because one unit might have something wrong and the other one doesn't. Well, then designate which unit.
Yeah, good idea. Any questions on AVID? Moving on, people. All right.
One question.
Yeah.
On the garage that you mentioned, so let's say it's full and you can't do any visual inspections. Do you even worry about that later? Or you just put it in there and be done with it?
Yeah, usually
Go ahead.
Usually I'll just put it in there and be done with it. I have a home inspectors that will say, hey, I really couldn't inspect anything here, but I'm happy to come back when this garage is empty to look at it for you. So that kind of covers it.
Yeah, and the big problem is that sometimes the garage isn't empty until the day they're moving out, right before it closes.
Yeah.
So that's where I think David's answer fits most of the time. You disclose that and you're done with it.
Okay, let's see here.
What's next, David?
On our little list here, we skipped over seller property questionnaire, the good old SBQ. Let me find that. Here it is. All right. By the way, you guys, just a word of side note. Under each document in CAR and on zip forms, under the title it says revised. So the last time this questionnaire was revised, June 2018. And you can see when the last time documents were updated and resubmitted. Luckily, part of being zip forms is they're automatically updated for you right here in zip forms. You don't have to go searching for the latest document. A lot of times I've had an agent submit an offer on a listing this year on like 2 versions ago of the offer. It's like from June of 2015. I'm like, you're on the wrong offer. Like, where are you getting your paperwork from? So just a side note, that's what this means right here is the last time this document was updated. All right, Richard, do you want to jump in the TD or the SPQ here?
Yeah, the seller property questionnaire is basically they're asking you more stuff, almost like the TDS. You get down to the questions that you check off yes or no, kind of like on the TDS. Do you know if it's had any chemicals stored in the garage, especially toxic chemicals, things like that. It's funny that even batteries, things like that could fall under this. So tell them to read them closely before they fill them out. And by the way, this is seller filling it out, not you. So you'll read over the questions and seller will answer yes or no to them, and that's it. So we get back lots of time that agents on the other end say this wasn't filled out right, do it again. They don't have a right to tell you that, because if he filled it out wrong and he answered wrong, then he answered it wrong. That's what the seller did. If it's something that they want to correct, they can correct it. If they don't want to, they don't have to. So don't let an agent on the other end tell you didn't fill that out right. Well, first of all, you didn't fill it out. The seller did. And, we're not the seller's boss to be able to tell them that they did it wrong, but you might point out to them if it's that way and see if they want to change it. So that's come up 2 or 3 times just recently in the office. And the answer is if the seller filled it out that way, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
So
it says right here, Richard, on this bullet point, sellers' disclosures are not a substitute for your own investigations personal judgments or common sense.
There you go.
Yeah. All right, so moving down the line, again, in my experience, most of the questions under like disaster relief, mold issue, a lot of these are gonna be no. Oftentimes a seller will do alterations, modifications, improvements prior to listing the home. So this is gonna be yes. And anytime you hit yes, you gotta write an explanation. So what did they do? Oftentimes you have to do an attachment if there's a lot to explain. If there's not, you can get sort of brief. Hey, we painted exterior in 2020. We painted the interior in 2021. Updated bathroom floor in 2018. You know, just what you did and when is generally a good idea. If it gets, like I said, if it gets more lengthy, then you want to add a attachment. And I've done that many times, just a bullet point attachment of everything they've done. If there's pets on the property, you gotta hit yes, you know, and explain it down below. So there's 4 pages of the seller property questionnaire. Pretty easy to go through and answer. A lot of times your clients will have questions and you just help them out as best you can. So any questions on the seller property questionnaire?
I have one question. So what if you have parents, one is deceased and then the other one passed away, and if the kids they don't know anything about the house? Do you have the attorney fill this out, or how is it going to be worded? Because I know back in Kansas, it would basically say the new, or the kids or whoever is in charge after the parents have died has never lived in the home, and then they would sign it, and of course the attorney would get involved. But I didn't know here in California, how is that done?
Well, how is it? The person who's selling the home has to complete that form. So if it's the owner, whoever the current owner is.
Okay, so if they've never lived in the house ever, they just fill it out the best as they can, or
Yeah.
do they write on never lived in the home, or what's the correct way for the California law?
Well, it depends on a couple of it depends on a couple of things. If it's sold through a trust, then there is, you know, you want to get into the trust documents. There's a trust advisory. Let me just open that up real quick. Okay, so if say you're selling it on behalf of the trust, it says right here what the seller must comply with. Known facts, material, you know, this you are not exempt from these things, from providing these disclosures. So you are required to do the TDS form. And then, like Yolanda said, hey, I've never lived in the property. I've wrote in a recent one, seller never lived in the property. I inherited this home and I don't know anything about it. This particular seller never even stepped foot in the house. So you literally write that out. Richard?
Yeah, same thing. I was going to just go back to what Yolanda told us on the TDS. Tell them, fill it out the best you can. If you don't know, leave it blank, and then put somewhere in there, like Yolanda said too, not covering anything that you filled out, that seller has never lived in home. And then you're covered. You did the best you could, but because it's not totally filled out is why, you know, that this comment saying that I never lived here. Does that answer that, Cynthia?
Yes, and so would we put that in our private comments on our listing? Would we do, or I don't know, do we do that, or do we just leave that alone? And if the question is brought up by the buyer's agent, then we let them know?
You can, I mean, just to give them a heads up, just say,
Okay.
hey, owners never lived in the home, you know, limited knowledge, never lived there, you know, something like that.
Yeah, this is a probate or this is a trustee sale, whatever, just one little line. Okay, what's next, David?
Natural hazard disclosure report. That one, we really don't need to get into. Basically, I mean, well, I don't have a copy of that here in our transaction because that is an outside report that you get. And in that report are signature pages where the buyers acknowledge and sellers acknowledge having received it. That's what that means.
Yeah, and the key to that one is that that's a third-party disclosure. So it's not coming from the seller, it's not coming from us. It's coming from a third party that was paid to send this to us so that we could supply it to the buyer. So that kind of covers the seller quite a bit.
Although, Richard, David, when we have to do the combined hazards booklet receipt, I know it's in the natural hazard disclosure report in itself, it's down at the bottom. Sometimes it's not. Depends on who the company is. Is it legal to just have that uploaded into the Zipformplus as we have like the Rekey and the checklist, in that way it could be available? Is there like a generic that we can use, or do we have to use that one that's in some of the links that come in with the NHD report?
You could probably use a generic one. I don't have a copy of that off the top of my hand right now.
Because I know Teresa has one for me, and we use that when there's none in those reports. So maybe if you guys can maybe upload one, because it makes it easier sometimes. Sometimes, especially even when you have a buyer, sometimes those agents don't send it in, and, it's just kind of, we have to have it because you have it as a required item, and sometimes it's just a pain trying to find it.
That's right. Yeah,
Thank you.
Have to upload it.
Yeah, the receipt.
Thank you.
All right, next, the good old SBSA, which stands for Statewide Buyer and Seller Advisory. So let me go find that guy. Here it is. This is a nice, geez, how many pages is this thing up to now? 14 pages.
14
I
pages.
think when I started, it was probably around 8. So they keep adding to it every year. As you can see, this was just revised in June of this year in 2021. And it's 14 pages of a lot of stuff. Your clients only need to sign the last page. They used to make buyers and sellers initial every single page, which is kind of overkill. The way I explain this is very simply. I say, hey, this is a document which explains everything a buyer should investigate on your property or be aware of here in the state of California. Many of the things listed in this document don't even apply to your property. For example, formaldehyde or
we hope.
Septic system, or what the school. It talks about homes living on the golf course. Obviously, if you're selling a home that's not on the golf course, it doesn't apply. So I just say this is a document that basically says anything and everything a buyer should inspect when buying a property in the state of California. And they kind of thumb through it a little bit, and then they end up just signing the last page. So as you can see, anything it talks, here you go, it's a good one right here. They probably added this one recently. Water shortages and conservation. Obviously, there's some drought restrictions in place, so that buyers and sellers should know that. Here's the one I mentioned about being on a golf course, and it says there could be flying golf balls coming at your house. It says that in there at some point.
Especially if Richard is playing.
If Richard's playing, you better put up a net in front of the fence. No. Neighborhood noise sources, schools, underground pipelines. So it goes on and on. Sea level coastal properties. That's a new one. I haven't even read this. Sea level rise has a potential to affect coastal residents, recreation, development, coastal communities, may or may not be addressed. Yeah, so that's a new paragraph or item 7. That's the first time I've seen that.
Yeah, David, think how important that is down in the south where those hurricanes come in.
But this
Over here-
is
Over
California
here, it means
document.
nothing.
This is the California document, so I don't know.
That's right. Yeah, there we go.
So basically, that's how I explain it to people. If they want to read it line by line, they're welcome to, but I don't go page by page, item by item on this, it's just, too much overkill.
Yeah.
It talks about marketing, internet, blogs, social media. Basically, your house is going to be on the internet, all that good stuff. So here's the
Yeah.
signature page. Richard, do you have anything
Yeah.
to add to this?
Yeah, David, two things. What I tell them, read over this and see if there's anything you have questions about. Well, first of all, I might have 1 out of 10 people that'll read the whole thing
Mhm.
and then they just sign it. You newer agents that have never done this before, please read over it, because sure enough, you're going to get that client that's going to
Yeah.
find one thing in there and ask a question. And if you've at least read over it a little bit, you probably will be able to answer that. Like the silly one about the golf courses, things like that. So read over it one time and you'll probably be good for the rest of your career unless they change it.
Yeah, well, they just did.
Yeah, they added one.
Hey, here's a question for you, Richard. I just noticed this on the SBSA, they have a rekeying. All locks should be rekeyed immediately upon close of escrow to ensure buyer safety. So if they're acknowledging this already, do we need our separate rekeying disclosure form?
Well, the answer I was given on that was yes, and more is always better than not enough, because they'll probably say, that was so long, I just signed it and I didn't read it.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, does it cover you? It sure does. But that separate rekey, which is just one little quick page that you read in 10 seconds,
Okay.
it might cover you a little bit better, because sure enough, they don't rekey it and the neighbor comes over 5 days later, says, oh, here's your key that that the original owner had given us in case they locked out or this or that, or they don't like you, and then they just wait till you're gone and rob you. And then what are the cops going to say? No sign of forced entry. Yeah, they just walked in with the key they had. So that's the story you give to your buyer, maybe why they should rekey. So I would say yes, continue to fill it out for that reason.
Okay. Anybody have any questions on the statewide buyer and seller advisory?
I just had to add something, just because now that we have a lot of solar companies.
Yeah, there's solar down here at the bottom.
Yeah, at the very bottom. Yeah, I saw that. It's important because, first of all, the maintenance. So, they have to be aware. Very, very important to know that they don't come back to me. That there's not even a home warranty that covers that now that I know of. So that's important that they know that. Don't call me. I have nothing to do with it. You kind of took the lease, or even now there's purchases that are happening. So, they have to make sure they're aware that that's kind of something else they have to take as the maintenance of the house, not something that we can kind of help them with. So I kind of try to, go through that kind of, but sometimes the solar is not applicable, but at the same time, it's happening a lot. So I think that's, more and more.
For sure.
Yeah.
Pretty soon it'll be solar and everything.
Yep.
All right. Absolutely. So moving on, let's see what we got next. Talked about that. Oh, okay. Let's get into the market conditions advisory. If Richard wants to start talking, I'll find it. Let's see where to go. Maybe it's not added.
Well, a real big one about market conditions and advisory is, and I'll wait till we get on it. Maybe we'll get kind of close
need
to
to add
that
that
one
one.
point.
I need to add it. Okay.
Oh,
Found it. Error. That's Richard's fault. Okay.
there we go.
Here we go. Market conditions advisory, older document. It hasn't been updated since 2011. So,
I would say what it protects mostly is us as agents. And you can see right there, offering price. You know, what does your buyer ask you? Oh, what should I offer? You know, and again, be neutral with your answers, because especially in this market, oh, well, you know, full price probably won't get this house today. Well, you're saying that based on what's going on in the market, there's multiple offers, but they can actually come back after you if you say you have to offer this to get the house. Well, and they offer it, and then for some reason they find out who came out second, and who came out second was 20,000 behind you. Then, you know, they can come after you and say, well, you made me offer 19,000 more than I needed to, and I'm suing you for that. So here we go. We have a disclosure about it saying that the offering price should be determined, of course, by the buyer and not so much by the agent, but the agent does give advice. You know, here we go about non-contingent offers. Explain the contingencies, and if they do drop them, what happens? What comes up for jeopardy? Well, you know, the deposit. So this page does cover us as agents more than anything else. So I would kind of read over this one and make sure. There you go, loan contingency, appraisal contingency. And David, what's next? I think
Yeah, this is a perfect opportunity, if you haven't already done so, to explain contingencies to your clients, like what they are and how it affects the buyer's deposit.
yeah,
But, you know, loan contingency, appraisal contingency, and on the next page, inspection contingency. So,
and of course you should have done it when you made the offer, but if you didn't, maybe touch
exactly.
on it again. Do you remember me telling you about this? Well, here it is. And
Yeah,
you know, here come the multiple offers, which we're going through a lot right now. So this one is kind of spot on to what's going on in our
Right
market
now.
today.
yeah, for sure. So buyer and seller acknowledge that, and you move on.
Yep. You're just disclosing this stuff to them. It's not, you know, not anything that is maybe a fact or maybe not. It's just that it could happen.
The BIW, buyer's inspection waiver, used if buyers do not have inspections. So basically, this is a good one because this will come up. I don't think I've added it, but we'll go search for it. So you can,
Yeah.
if you guys don't know already, you can, if you know the name of the form, you can type in the short and it'll find it for you. The BIW.
I have a question on that.
Yes.
So if they only order a home inspection and no termite, roof, or anything else, do you still need a waiver for those other ones? Or are you okay because they ordered a home inspection?
It's not required, but to cover yourself, you might want to have them initial, you know, this saying, hey, we're not doing a pest inspection. Buyer has decided not to obtain an inspection for wood destroying pests. Waivers of additional inspections or other reports. So you can also put in the roof there as well. You know, it's not required, but I don't know. It's, if you want to cover yourself, huh, Richard?
Yeah, and Magda, if you do have that list that talks about most of the inspections, there's that one list where you can check off a bunch of them. If you
The
maybe have
elections?
them, yeah, maybe have them sign that, because what they do is they come back and say, well, I got a home inspection, but Magda didn't tell me I could get this, this, and this inspection. And if I would have done that, then I'd have found out the roof was no good or something like that. So if you had that one sheet signed, then they know that they could have gotten all these other inspections and they chose not to.
Right. Okay.
There's a form. There's also a BIE, buyer's inspection elections. So let's look
Yeah,
at
that's the one I'm talking about.
that. Okay.
Yep.
So
That-
basically it has the address and then buyer inspection election. Buyer represents and agrees that the buyer has independently considered the available inspections at this time and has decided only to order the following. So this is the one you should maybe have them sign. Hey, we're just going to do the general home inspection. Check that box and then have them sign.
Then, of course, how many do all of those inspections? If you had all that done, I don't even know what that bill would equal to, and that's usually what stops them. But at least they saw it, signed it. Okay, in the judge's eyes, they would say, yeah, Magda showed them this. They knew what they could do. They chose not to do it. Magda did her job.
All right, let's see. So I think I have that BIE on the list too. So yeah, buyers inspection elections, not required, maybe a good idea if they're not doing all of them. If they don't do any inspections, you definitely want the waiver form signed. Makes
Yes.
sense. Okay.
Yes.
Next one down is a somewhat newer document, water conserving plumbing fixtures and the carbon monoxide detector notice. Pretty self-explanatory, but let's take a look at it.
Yeah, David, let me kind of go over the water conservative, because a lot of people, when this first came out, freaked out thinking they had to start changing everything in their house.
That's right.
This is basically saying that toilets, faucets, shower heads, things like that, if they don't meet the standard of, I think, from 92, 94, that means it's not under the state requirements now, but it does not mean that they have to do anything to the house. It just means it's maybe using more water than it should be. And that's all. A seller freaked out, said, I'm not changing all those valves and, toilets and everything else. No, you don't have to. This is just disclosing that if it wasn't up to that date, then it maybe doesn't, that maybe you should look into it after you buy the house. So that's a real big one. So don't let a seller or a buyer freak out on you. It's only disclosing that this is the way it is.
Right.
Now, of course, the second part, really easy, the carbon monoxide. Every house has to have that now, along with the smoke detectors. And you have to have it on each level, just one. So if you're walking around the house, they don't have it, you might tell them, hey, get to Home Depot and get one and stick it on the wall here.
Yes, sir. And then both parties sign those. And there are no exceptions on this carbon monoxide detector. All right.
What if you notice that there is no carbon monoxide detector or smoke detectors? Is it the seller's responsibility then to provide those to the house?
Well, they're supposed to, but what we're seeing, on let's call it a more regular house that someone's going to move into and live, they should. And the appraiser will even call it too for you if there's a loan on the house. Now, on a fixer, a flipper, a lot of times that's not in there. And the flipper says, I'm not doing it. Well, you know what? You're going to have to do it to sell it when you flip it anyway. So you probably want to put a new one in there if the house is a mess, because it probably just won't be able to clean that one up. So you can hold out and see if they'll do it. But if it's, not that big of a deal stopping you from buying the house, I wouldn't let it stop that for sure.
No. Okay, thank
So,
you.
yeah, generally the seller would provide them. However, there on page 3 of the offer, or page 2, under allocation of costs, there's a paragraph that says you have to check a box. Who's going to pay to meet the smoke detector and carbon monoxide compliance? So when I'm writing offers, most of you guys know, when I'm writing offers, I'm going to check that the seller shall pay for the cost of compliance to make sure smoke and carbon monoxide detectors are installed.
Oh, that's a good idea. Very good. Yeah.
Yeah. So that way, if the appraiser goes out and there's no carbon monoxide detector installed, then it's the seller's responsibility to get one installed, or smoke detectors for that matter. So
yeah.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
I was just thinking about it. Like Richard said, the appraiser normally catches that, but also if you don't have it and seeing how difficult it is to get appraisers to come back, you might want to just remind the sellers to do it prior to the appraiser coming. And
Yep.
then also the cost of those items aren't that much. It's only about 20, 30 bucks or so. So it's not even worth the headache, and it's 2 screws to put in. That's it.
Well, and they'll charge you to make a second visit up to 150 bucks a lot of times. So, you know, you just want to avoid that for everybody's sake, if possible. Like yesterday, I got a call that the appraiser wanted to come between 10:30 and 12. Well, my client didn't have a carbon monoxide, nor does he have a car to go to Home Depot. So what was yours truly doing? 8 o'clock in the morning, going to buy a carbon monoxide detector, going to his house, installing it just ahead of the appraiser coming. So it's like, because I don't want things to get delayed where the appraiser has to come back 5 days later after the carbon monoxide's installed, you know? So sometimes you just gotta be a little bit on top of things. So,
Proactive, huh?
Yeah, good point, David. You saved on a reinspection, like you said, it's $150, $200.
And a delay.
And appraisers are, they might not come back for a month.
Yeah.
David?
Yeah.
So for the smoke detectors, where should they be located at?
You should have one in each bedroom and in the hallway, like I think the hallway outside of the bedrooms. The carbon monoxide should be outside the bedrooms, like in a hallway on each floor if it's 2 stories.
Okay.
And anybody else? I think that's the requirements.
Thank you.
That'd be $1.
Okay.
Just kidding.
Coffee.
Who is that?
Claudia.
Oh, hi, Claudia. Hi.
Hi.
All right.
David, one thing to point out, I usually do my AVID, like if it's a buyer, I do my AVID, right before they do the appraisal, because that way you can point out those things to the listing agent. If I'm a listing agent, I usually take care of that when I do the walkthrough for the first time when I'm going to list the property.
Yeah.
So when you're going to list the property, I have a list of things that I tell my sellers, you don't want this delayed. You don't want to have any issues. This is your responsibility. So you make sure that all this stuff gets taken care of. Those are the law of the state, not the buyer asking for it, but the law for the state of California, because, that kind of makes them aware that they better hurry up. And if you don't want any delays, you better get it done soon.
Yeah. On a listing appointment, I check for 3 things just every single time: smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detector, and strapping of the water heater. And if there's an issue with any of those, I let them know at that day and time. Hey, we need to get these addressed,
Yep.
And in my circumstance, the seller wasn't able to get it because he's an older gentleman, doesn't have a car. So I had to take care of it. So good point, Yolanda. All right, let's see where we at. Okay, we did talk about the Rekey disclosure. Let's pop over that real quick. So we have an internal document for our office, basically for the buyer to sign only, saying, hey, you're now the owner. It's recommended you get all, locks rekeyed, change the codes, yada, yada, yada. Pretty self-explanatory. Most people should do it, but you just want to get it signed by the buyers.
Where's that in your office?
I'm sorry?
Where do you find that in your office?
It's right here in Zipforms.
It's right there. Okay, sorry, never
Rekey
mind.
form. Yeah. Okie dokie. Okay, moving down the list here, we got. All right, receipts for reports or page 1 of inspections signed by buyers. So let's look at so here's the short code RFR. I don't know if it's in there. Let's find out. RFR. Nope. So you got to add it. Okay, so the RFR is a good one. It covers your butt, and it's basically the buyer acknowledging what they've received during this transaction. So they've received a home inspection, wood, termite inspection. They did a roof report. They got the condo disclosures. They got the lease from the tenants, you know, anything that they've received and by whom. So let's say they used California Pest Control, then they used Protec inspection, and then the date they were given the report. So they acknowledge, and then there's, you know, obviously more you can fill in. And then so the buyers will acknowledge having received these reports. You know, it's a, instead of having them sign each and every single report, which can make the file enormous, this is quick and concise, like, hey, we got all these documents. I just think it's a good thing to include, don't you, Richard?
Yeah, I think it is too, and you're right, because signing all the others. But if you have done that just because they came in at different times and you had the disclosures, not disclosures, inspections signed individually, then you don't really need this sheet because you have done it, but you just did it the long way.
Yeah. This Teresa does this for our files, and it works out
Yeah,
absolutely easy.
way cleaner.
Yeah, for sure. All right, we're getting down near the end here.
Yay.
See what we got. Well, we all know contingency removal, not so much a disclosure, but it's should be obviously provided that buyers remove contingencies as time goes through the transaction.
Yeah, we go over that quite a bit, but just remember kind of the main days.
Yeah.
17 on loan, 17 on inspections, 21 on loan. If you'll remember those three the most, but even at the beginning, 3 days to get the deposit in. What is it, 7 days to get the disclosures over to the buyer. So keep those in mind because you might have to use that to kind of get that going.
Yeah, one we skipped over, it didn't have an asterisk, but it is needed on homes built before 1978. And that's the lead-based paint disclosure. So make sure you're using that on older homes for sure.
Any home built 1978 or older, use it. If it's 1981, skip it.
All right, so
I have a
You know-
couple of
ahead.
things that I didn't know if we needed to add to that list of the disclosures, because as of this year in January was the home hardening law and the defense space law.
yeah,
Are those a requirement? Is that correct? Did I understand that that's what PAR was telling us to do? Because I couldn't remember if we are required to have both of those, especially if we're going up in the mountains, you know,
up
towards
in the mountains, I'd definitely include it.
Yes.
That's what I have for my listings. I have that because I'm up in that area in Valley Springs and fires do happen. So I wasn't sure. I just need to verify to make sure that that's the correct
I mean,
answer.
it's better to be safe than sorry.
Okay.
This, like she said, this document just came out in May of 21 because of all the wildfires, and that's what it's about. Well, our area, it's not, you know, I'll rephrase that. In Stockton, it's not a big wildfire, you know, area. But if you're getting up to Valley Springs, you know, Auburn, any of those foothill communities, I would say yes, it's a requirement.
Yeah. And
David.
just take a
Yeah.
quick look at your NHD too, because your NHD might cover you on
Yeah.
some of these. Then
Yeah.
you don't have to do it again. But then if you don't see it in there, whip it out and have it ready to go when you're having all these signed.
Yeah, for sure.
David, I just closed one, David and Richard, I just closed one in the Token Colony area, which is east of 88. And I did include that in there because I think
Right.
that's important for us to consider, you know, although I marked the one I think is 4B way in the bottom, second, I think it's 4B, that says no local ordinance buyer, you know, just mark that. There says
Yeah.
no local ordinance in the bottom. or number 2, mark that. But at the same time, because it was a couple acres, so I mean, it did have a lot of fuel that could have damaged a property if my client didn't taking care of the abatement of all the weeds and stuff. So I kind of do that if it's a property that applies to kind of that area. I mean, to an area that's going to have, even though it might not be on the NHD, but still,
Yeah.
I think that we can use the discretion.
Yeah, absolutely. Good one.
Well, but also too, I mean, when you live up in the foothills, you gotta mow that down, and you get a rock, and it can spark and start a fire either way, whether someone else did it from a blowout on their tire or someone trying to mow down the weeds. Any of that could happen. So that's another reason why I wasn't sure about this, because where I live, if you don't cut it down, you're getting burned down.
Yeah.
That's why I wasn't sure to make that as a requirement or not when we do the listings, and or if we have a buyer looking up in that area, to add that in there if the listing agent hasn't done that.
Yes, the answer is yes to that for sure. We just don't have it in there because obviously where we're at in Stockton kind of doesn't apply. But you add it if you're in that area. That'd be, you and Yolanda for sure, and anybody else that goes up there. But you're going to be the one that knows that right at the beginning. So
Yolanda Salazar, I forgot I did add it. The combined hazard booklet is in the transaction here.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. Yeah, thank you.
Any questions or comments on disclosures? Now, we didn't cover the disclosures that are included when you make an offer or a listing, such as, agency disclosure, possible representation, wire fraud. There's a newer one, Privacy Act. We didn't cover those, so I go in, read them, and a lot of those are repetitive. You'll find that these are listed both on the offer docs as well as the listing docs. So both buyer and seller have to sign those.
Yeah, David, just a quick note on at least that one, the disclosure regarding relationship.
Okay.
All that's saying is that I'm representing you, Mr. Buyer, as a buyer. So you check off buyer, they sign, you sign. And the key to that is you want to sign that before you start in with anything else with them. According to real estate law, you need to establish that you are representing them before you start in on contracts and other disclosures, because if you did it last, that means you weren't representing them the whole time you did all those other things.
Yeah.
Now, would you ever get caught on that? You might not ever get caught on that, but just do it in that order and you're always going to be right.
That's why this document's first on when you print out a listing agreement or an offer, because you're supposed to sign this one first.
Yep.
Yeah, one thing also, if we don't list the property, we can complete that along with the waiver to list the property in the MLS. That way we'll be in compliant, and, because if we do the, not the waiver to list the MLS, but we don't do that, then that's another reason why, it might come back to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can use that with the buyer. People say, do I have a buyer's contract? Well, no, but I have a buyer's disclosure that they signed saying I'm representing them. Would it hold up in court? No, but it might make them feel like they're, more connected to you because they did sign something with you. So with that, I think we're almost done.
Well, yeah, for sure. I'll just couple thoughts here. Disclosures can be it's kind of the pain of our job, right? Making sure they're signed, but they were all created for a reason, and that's the reason was somebody sued somebody at some point in time in the state of California and won. So now they created a disclosure, basically protecting the buyer, protecting the seller, protecting the brokerage, protecting the agents. So therefore, we require it. So hopefully, the checklist here will help in making sure that you have them all. One thing that helps us immensely. And one thing Teresa does extremely well is sorting and organizing your transaction here. The best thing I like to do is create a new folder. There's an add folder button here. And I simply call it executed docs, right? So it creates a folder. It's right down here at the bottom. So anytime I get something signed by a buyer and seller, I just drag it right into that folder. So you know where all of your executed docs, they'll all be listed here. It's just a, whoops. Let's go back into Main Street. It's just a way to organize your file, your life, your where all your signed documents are. So I'd highly recommend you do that as well, and create a folder. That way it's super organized. And since I have all of you, most of you guys still on, I'm going to show you a little shortcut. I've showed it before, but I'll show it again. So we're in the documents. If you go back to summary, there's a button here called email to transaction. So if you click on that, it opens up this. It says email to transaction. You can send document messages and more directly to this transaction by including this email. So what I do is I copy this email address, right? And then if somebody sends me a signed, if somebody sends me a signed document, I will go in and try to close it, but if somebody sends me a signed document, I'll forward it to this email address. And when you forward it to the email address, it'll automatically, whatever attachments are in that email, it will create a new folder for you called inbox. And then it'll automatically upload those documents into the folder called inbox. So you're no longer having to download and then re-upload them to zip forms. You can just send them right into there automatically. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions on that?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, David.
Welcome.
Also, another thing that I do personally, I combine all the disclosures or reports and do in 3, when I send them for you to sign to approve, I send in the purchase docs or listing docs. And then
in that
to help
folder.
out.
So Yolanda and Teresa, what they'll do is they'll have an executed docs. And then within that, they'll have a couple other folders. So they'll have listing docs, and they put all the listing paperwork in there. Then they have, offer documents. So it has the offer. And then if you want to get fancy, you can add a disclosure document. So, it separates it out, and you just go in there and it's just easy to find everything.
Yeah.
We've had agents with they ask for approval and their documents are all over the place, and it's like a Easter egg hunt trying to find them,
Yes.
But it's
it
all
is.
good as long as you get them, right? You got to get them. But use this as an organizational method as well to save your life a little bit.
Yep.
For the checklist, real quick, David, on the checklist, you are going to be updating it because I know we have the CPA, which is a commercial property agreement, but we do need the probate purchase agreement because there's some of them are coming up a lot more now. So
I've kind of, a commercial, that should have its own checklist, and we don't have it.
Well, it's in the checklist, so that's why I wanted to point it out that the CPA means the commercial purchase agreement, but I just did one, and then I have to kind of But so
I would just list them separately down here.
Yeah. But we do need the probate because there's some coming up, and we do get them now and then. So if you can add, I usually put it at the end where it says the manufacturer home purchase agreement, but it's just it'll be good. So then for the commercial, I kind of made it to that it could be applicable to that commercial. But yeah, like you said, you might do a commercial altogether separate. So that's good. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So you up at the top here, purchase docs. So RPA, everybody knows what the RPA is, residential purchase agreement. 95% of the office is using that. So we're going to check that. Okay, CPA. Yolanda just mentioned it. That's commercial property purchase agreement, commercial property agreement. Check that. Does anybody know what VLPA is? VLPA.
Vacant land.
Vacant land. Very good. Winner, winner. Who knows what the MHPA is?
Mobile home.
Mobile
Or
home or manufactured. Yep. So depending on what type of property you're writing an offer on, you check that box right there.
Yep.
Comprende, amigas and amigos?
Gracias.
Any other questions? Who wants to take me to lunch? All right, it's that time.
I have one more thing real quick that sometimes some people don't know about, and that is when you're doing the AVID, you don't see this very often, but like bolted down air compressors, certain things, if you're looking through their garage, if you happen to see it and you notice it, and then you go to closing and it was bolted down, and let's say you wrote it down that it was bolted down, because I actually ran into this one time back in Kansas. The seller did not put on there that the air compressor didn't stay with the sale of the home, because it was bolted down. Well, we go to closing, we did the walkthrough and it was gone. And it didn't say anywhere in the paperwork that it was because it was bolted down, because we made a comment about it. And so we noticed it was missing. They did not put it in the paperwork. So it didn't go to court. It went to mediation. The buyer ended up getting the air compressor.
Wow. Yeah, it's considered a fixture.
It's just a thought to keep on the back burner. If you see something like that and you're not sure, write it down anyways, maybe, or just kind of keep it at the back of your mind, because there are buyers who actually pay attention to detail.
Yes, there are. Yeah.
And they should.
All right. Well, hopefully everybody got a little bit something out of that. And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, this didn't cover everything, but especially new agents, give you a good review of it. And remember, call David and I when you have questions on that, and we'll be happy to go over them with you. And if anybody has situations that they hit, let's call it the weird ones, like the one Cynthia just said, let us know. It's good to share that, because then that'll pop back in our head when we see something like that. That might save us a little grief at the end of the escrow.
Sure. Well, I appreciate all you guys being here today. We had over 20 people, which I'm surprised on a boring disclosures class. So that's pretty awesome.
Great meeting, David. Great meeting.
Yeah, it was fun. So surprisingly good time, but I appreciate all the comments and questions and dialogue, interaction. It was all good stuff. So with that, I think we're done, right?
Yep. Thank you, David. Appreciate the good information.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Have a great day. We'll see you soon. High five.
Thanks, David.
Ooh, yeah.
Bye-bye. Have a good one.
High five.
Good job,
Thank you,
guys.
everybody.
All right. High five.